welcome to this last edition of Taking the Myth of the Year. I'm Stephen Knight, and joining me is Iram Ramzan. Iram, how are you doing?
I'm not too bad, thank you. How are you?
Good. Have you been Omicroned yet? Omicroned, even?
I don't think I have. I had COVID last year, and I don't know if I had it again this year, because I was ill about 2 months ago. So I don't know what that was, but I don't think it was, Omicron.
Every time I get a sniffle now, it's like lateral flow test.
Yeah, everyone's... people's nostrils must be, must be to shit now, because they've just been shoving a swab up there.
Yeah, I've had more
right,
shit up my nose than Diego Maradona this last couple of weeks. But it seems like... So, there's good and bad news. The bad news seems to be that it's far more transmissible. It seems to be working through the population fairly rapidly. The good news is the symptoms don't seem as harsh. But obviously we've got to keep an eye on them hospitalisations. I'm bored of it now. Are you fucking bored of it all?
I was bored of it from day one.
You had far less tolerance for COVID than I did straight from the bat.
To be honest, I was like pretty much everyone else. I was... I did think initially, oh my God, what is this? It is a bit scary. We didn't really know what we were dealing with as much then. But you'd think nearly 2 years on, we'd have got a handle on it by now. And it's, 2 years on, I don't think it's going to be as deadly as a disease as it was when it first ripped through our communities. And as you said, Omicron or Micron, whatever, however you pronounce it, it sounds, more transmissible, which is not good, but the symptoms seem to be, it feels like you've got a cold, basically. So it's getting to that stage where, hopefully it's not as deadly. And last time I checked, the hospitalizations were flatlining. So I think we're down from what we were a month ago, and that is good news. I understand that, there will inevitably be some pressure on the health system. Just seems to me that the NHS struggles to cope with anything that comes its way.
How dare you say anything
Sorry, was that blasphemous?
Mildly critical of our NHS. You need to be on that doorstep tonight,
NHS.
clapping your little heart out for our brave heroes.
Like, fuck, I'm going to clap. Hell to the no.
I wasn't a big fan of that either. It felt very
just...
North Korean, didn't it? It felt very much like everybody out and put on a display for the leaders. I'm not a big fan of like forced worship or collective praise. It's all very religious to me.
It was one journalist who said that we're treating the NHS as though it is the sick patient when it is the thing that is supposed to be protecting sick patients itself. So we're doing all of this to protect the NHS, basically. And at what point do we stop?
Yeah.
Because at the moment they're having to postpone everything now. So Sajid Javid, Health Secretary, has said that they're going to stop non-urgent appointments and surgeries in order to get everybody boosted. How many people are going to get even more ill next year because they've not been able to see a doctor, they've not been able to have an operation? How many cancer diagnoses are we going to get? I think in the long run our health is probably going to get a lot worse.
Yeah, it's very hard to quantify that, isn't it? And here's the issue I have. So I'm pro-vax. I get how it works. I understand why it's important to get the population vaccinated. Now, I'm not sure what our uptake is in England, but it's quite high. It's fairly positive. Now, even if
It's been very high. It's been very high.
Now the goal is to get as close to 100% as you can, and there's a certain threshold which is preferable. Now, even if we were, so let's just say the UK managed to get itself 100% vaccinated, which it never will, we're still relying on every other nation on planet Earth to do the same in order to avoid the potential for new variants and mutations and things like that. So even if, we never get in Africa or America fully vaccinated. That's never going to happen. So are we just going to live in a cycle of endless boosters now? Is that it?
I think you'll get to that point where, like a flu jab, we'll be getting one once or twice a year, and if you're elderly, you'll be getting them quite regularly. I think that is just what's going to happen in the future. Now we will just be relying on people getting vaccinated regularly.
Brilliant. Right, that's enough COVID shit. I would like to draw your attention to a story which has got a bit of everything in it, and this is from the Daily Mail, and this is the headline: Secular atheist train conductor who celebrated pubs reopening by declaring he didn't want to live in an alcohol-free caliphate wins unfair dismissal claim. Now, there's a lot going on here. This is an article about a gentleman called Jeremy Sleath. He's 63 years old. He was a trains conductor from the West Midlands, and he's a secular atheist. Now, when they were, in the UK, they shut bars and pubs for the longest time, and when they reopened, he posted a message on his private social media, so not in the capacity of a trains conductor, just on his private social media, and he wrote, "Thank fuck our pubs open up today. We cannot let our way of life become like some sort of Muslim alcohol-free caliphate just to beat COVID-19. Now,
Okay.
fired him for that. It was on his personal Facebook page. He sent it in July 2020. They dismissed him for it. Now, I have a few issues with this story. I mean, first of all, it's a bit crass what he's written, but I think he's personally within his rights to type that out without losing his job, especially on his personal time. I mean, I don't understand here. Do we have to be in favour of a Muslim alcohol-free caliphate to keep your job? Do we have to?
Yes.
Or do we have to remain neutral on the idea of whether we want to live in an alcohol-free Muslim caliphate? I don't understand. I think they've just panicked. They saw the word Muslim and they fired him. But what's really concerning to me about this whole thing is that he did win his case for unfair dismissal, but he didn't win it under the guise of protected speech. He won it under a sort of technicality. The courts found that the processes weren't followed to dismiss him to the letter. Essentially an admin oversight is what won him his case. The judge actually claimed in her statement that the decision to sack him was harsh, but she said it was reasonable to conclude his post was racist.
What the fuck?
So,
sorry, how is it racist? I mean, most Muslims, especially if they're practicing, they don't drink alcohol. Most Muslim countries are dry states.
Yeah.
You can't drink in those countries unless maybe you have some sort of special license or you go to a hotel for foreigners. So how is that racist? Quite accurate to point it out, really.
I mean, he may have got away with this. I mean, here's an issue we have, and it's mainly a semantic and language one. Now, Muslim caliphate is perfectly accurate and descriptive to describe an Islamic caliphate. However, that may have produced less heat for him if he'd used the word Islamic caliphate instead of Muslim caliphate. People see the word Muslim and lose their mind in a way they don't with Christians, for example. I mean, it's even the same with Islam. I use Islamism or Islamist a lot. And I'd be perfectly fine to use Islam or Muslim. It's just, it sets alarm bells off.
Yeah, you're right. I sometimes fall into that trap as well because I know people say, oh, but this is a representative of Muslims or Islam. And you're like, oh.
Oh, yeah, I was very specific. Because, you don't want to deal with that back and forth argument about not all Muslims, especially when that was nothing like your original point anyway. So my takeaway from this is basically if you post on your private social media that you do not care to live in an alcohol-free Muslim caliphate, your employer would be justified in dismissing you just so long as they follow the correct dismissal procedure. No court in the land is going to protect your right to say that. And furthermore, they may accuse you of being racist. So that's pretty ridiculous. Scary, isn't it?
It is. That's quite worrying. I mean, I'd understand if he blatantly came out with something really racist.
Yeah.
Or if he was having a go at all Muslims and being bigoted. But all he said really was that he didn't want to live in an alcohol-free country, and that's his opinion. I think it just goes to show you that these things aren't private anymore.
Yeah.
And it's funny, isn't it, how you get, when you get people commenting on news stories, or they come on the radio and say, "Oh, I'm saying this in my personal capacity," and they could come out with anything and they don't really face any repercussions because they're not speaking on behalf of whatever organisation they're from. That's okay. But this guy is posting on his private Facebook page and got into trouble for that. I mean, I don't understand if he posted it on the company account, because that's quite unprofessional, maybe.
Yeah, of course, you can't. West Midlands Railway Twitter account. Can you imagine? You'd be like, "Hey, Jezza, let's bring it down a notch, fella." Yeah, but I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it's worth pointing out as well that I would imagine a significant portion of Muslims would not care to live under an alcohol-free Muslim caliphate either. Hence why the Muslim diaspora is pretty wide and far across Europe and other Western states, and that's a preference. So it seems to me like it's a strange way of doing this, but it seems to me by the judge saying this is racist or offensive, she's sort of inadvertently saying that most Muslims value an Islamic alcohol-free caliphate, which is just not the case. I mean, that's generalizing again about Muslims. That's putting out sort of negative stereotypes, I think.
Exactly.
It reminds me of that gentleman who posted that Billy Connolly clip on his private Facebook page.
Oh, yeah.
And he got fired. He worked for Asda, and Asda fired him, but, after some pressure and campaigning, reversed the decision. But I feel sorry for people at the minute, because there are some people that we don't hear of who have probably been fired, who don't get the support, don't get the spotlight shone on them, don't have a public profile. Like, if I was to be fired for my opinions, I've got a fairly sizable audience that I could bang the drum to. What about the people who don't? Like, just disappear into the woodworks, have no recourse, and have just been shafted because of an opinion they have. That's
exactly.
That's very concerning to me.
It really is, and it's good that the Free Speech Union actually helped this gentleman. But as you said earlier, it's quite worrying that he only won really on a technicality.
Yeah, I might repost his message verbatim on my social media accounts and see what happens. Just a little,
blocked.
little litmus test.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about New Zealand and a chap called Garth Cooper?
If we must, yes.
This is a weird one. It feels like I'm going back in time. It feels like the whole creationism versus science, just teach the controversy sort of ruckus. So the headline from the Daily Mail again, actually. God. Well,
he's just turning into an extremist now.
I try to vary my sources, but all the others paywall me now. The Daily Mail, I mean, I can see like 700 adverts on this article, but at least it's not paywalled. So yeah, selected 1 litre spirits for 16 quid at Tesco now, in case you're interested. Anyway, so the headline is, New Zealand academic is cancelled for opposing plans to teach Māori creation myth in science classes. Now faces expulsion from country's Royal Society. So we're putting a lot of stock in the idea that Western knowledge is somehow a product of imperialism and whiteness.
It isn't?
Well, in regards to science, I've seen people, the far left progressives, the woke, argue that science is a white man's imposition. Science isn't universal. Science isn't the same no matter where you try it. It's a white man's worldview of reality, and therefore it should face competition from more traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge, etc. And that's what they're pushing here. That there's a lot of talk about my truth, whereas science doesn't work in that regard. Science just finds truth, and that's your truth, my truth, his truth, they truth, her truth. You know what I mean? It's true no matter where you do. Z's truth.
So basically, like, because I was looking at this, because I didn't know what Maori belief on creation was, and apparently, according to their version, all living things originated from Tane Mahuta, sending his father Ranginui up to the sky and his mother Papa Tuanuku down to the earth. That sounds quite credible to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Rod Liddle.
He's in trouble.
Called that'd be another good one to get into as well. Rod Liddle called a reaction to the professor's letter madness and stupidity, and I pretty much agree with that. I mean, I'd understand. I mean, I understand if a school or schools wanted to teach about Maori beliefs, but they shouldn't come under the umbrella of science. I mean, if you want to teach it in RE or something, fine. Yeah. No issue with that. But are we really saying that story is a scientific fact that doesn't deserve to be challenged or ridiculed? I mean, this is just ridiculous. I mean, you know what? I'm not surprised that it's in fucking New Zealand. I mean, you know, you have a country that's pretty much locked everything down and went on a zero COVID strategy, and they've banned any under 18s from buying cigarettes forever now in a bid to tackle smoking and health. It just goes to show you what trajectory they're following, really. So I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, but Jacinda Ardern's amazing. You know, you can't say anything. I mean, there's some weird cult of personality about her from the West. Everyone points at her and says, like, if only we had a woman in charge like her. And it's like she's in charge of a country with 12 people in it. There are more
like 500 sheep.
Yeah, there are more sheep than people. I'd love to visit New Zealand. It seems like a beautiful, gorgeous place. I'm a big fan of some of its culture and comedic output and, you know, all sorts of things. But you can't compare. I mean, there's more people in London than New Zealand. They were saying how well she'd managed this pandemic, and if only Boris could take a leaf out of her book. And I can only think that, I mean, it seems very patronising to me the way they speak about it. It's almost like the expectation's so low for women in her role that they're almost surprised that she's doing a good job. And I just don't, I don't care for them games. But it doesn't surprise me that some sort of interest group representing a minority group or an indigenous group or whatever have tried to get their beliefs, practices and culture elevated to a status where it doesn't belong. That doesn't surprise me. That happens all the time. What does surprise me is the fact that the guy who said no, Garth Cooper, the professor at the University of Auckland, he said no, and he said it in quite. He didn't say, you know, this is bullshit, I'm not touching it. He said, well, you know, I think he even said, whilst it has cultural and, you know, historical significance, it doesn't belong in the science class, which is right. And he's facing disciplinary investigation action for that viewpoint. So if you can't say no to this nonsense in an academic setting, we are screwed, really, aren't we?
It follows on from what happened to Rod Liddle at Durham University. So Rod Liddle, well-known columnist, quite, you know, known for being quite provocative. You know, yes. He does like to rile people up. He does it deliberately. He knows what he's doing. So he's known for that. And he was invited to speak at Durham University by Professor Tim Luckhurst, principal of one of the colleges, and he's one of his friends as well. A bunch of students didn't know who he was, Googled him before he spoke and thought, oh my God, yeah, he's racist, he's Islamophobic, and he hates trans people. So they staged a walkout. The professor called their actions pathetic, and now he's been suspended for that. Trouble. He's in trouble for that. And, you know, and all these students are protesting about how unsafe they feel, you know, as though the presence of a man who writes funny columns or sometimes a bit tasteless, it can really make you feel unsafe. I mean, go fucking live in Afghanistan under Taliban rule, and then we'll see how unsafe you feel there in comparison. But you know, and now it's like he's expected he had to apologise. He had to apologise for his words, and all he said was that their actions were pathetic.
Yeah.
And it's made they made it out as though he said something really vicious and nasty, and he didn't. You know, they were fucking pathetic. You know, they're acting like petulant kids, and you know, these are people who we're treating as young adults, and they're just behaving like spoilt, selfish brats who cannot handle a different opinion of their own. And that's the problem that we're seeing increasingly, that people just cannot tolerate differing views.
Yeah, nicely put. I mean, I think what the issue that I have at the minute is the power dynamic in academic institutions is reversed to a really negative standard. So, I mean, obviously, when you went to college or university as a young adult, your peers would be the professors, the lecturers, the teachers, and you would do very well to stay in step with their instructions. And if you couldn't manage that, and if you couldn't behave in a way that was conducive to the principles of the institution, you could find yourself expelled, suspended, disciplined, etc. Now, the professors and the lecturers seem absolutely terrified of saying no to the far left progressives and inviting some sort of public scandal or inviting some negative press to these institutions. And we've seen that. We saw that in Evergreen. We've seen this with sort of the way Kathleen Stock's been treated on campus, and you know, people who you'd expect to stand up for these people go missing. And I don't know why we're sort of engendering this idea that we have a right, or it's even desirable even, to live your entire life without being offended or upset or hearing something you don't like. I mean, what planet is that preparing young people for? Where can they go to live that life?
Well, I mean, in a way, I don't actually blame the students. I actually blame the adults here. I blame the
they're letting them get away with it.
They are. I blame the university professors or the heads of the organisations who, you know, instead of standing up to a minority, let's face it is a minority, they're just going ahead and letting them get away with it. And I don't know, maybe they're panicking or they're scared of something. So, because the thing is, you expect students to protest about things or to object to all sorts of speakers on campus, and it's the job of the people in charge there to just put their foot down and say, you know, if you don't like this person, feel free to stage a protest, you know, attend the talk and let them know what you think of their views. And instead, they're just capitulating to their demands. And so I think it's the fault of those in charge, not the students. Yeah,
they're terrified, aren't they? And that's what I mean about this strange power imbalance now. And it's funny how you say, like, students are known for revolting and protesting, but it always came from like an ultra anti-authoritarian liberation perspective. More rights, less rules and oppression. It wouldn't be the students essentially back in the day wouldn't be told what they could say or think or read or watch. They'd say, fuck you to the man, we'll read this book if we want. You're not banning books. You stuffy conservatives are not banning the films I want to see. You're not telling me what words I can and can't use, or how I can express myself, or who I can love, or in what way. Now they're all like, ban that book, deplatform that speaker, do not use these words, and actually here's a list of words you must use, no gendered language please. That they're all coming at this now. Everything they're protesting against or opposing comes from a sort of conservative, authoritarian, anti-liberal slant. They don't realise that they're technically the new conservatives by attempting to shut down something as basic and fundamental to liberalism as somebody speaking publicly. It's insane. And you make some good points about Rod Liddle. I mean, he is inflammatory. He intentionally pokes buttons. He intentionally says things others won't dare to. I find him as a mixed bag, but still, for this reason, he's one of the first articles I turn to when I pick up my copy of The Spectator on Thursdays, because I know he's going to not hold back. And that's a rare quality, especially in this current climate.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I don't know if I would argue that the students, the new conservatives as such, because what exactly are they trying to conserve, really? But I get what you're trying to say, though, and it is worrying because it's not just a case of it remaining on campus. It's just it has spilled out now, and it does sometimes make you worry about what else is going to happen next, or if people will finally just stand up and say, you know what, enough is enough.
Yeah. I think the strength in numbers thing certainly helps, and I think you're right about this because I was very optimistic in the sense that I used to think, you know what, it's just a student thing, it's just a young adult thing. They'll grow out of it, they'll come out the other side, and we seem to be proliferating in they thems, don't we? Everywhere, this kind of ultra progressive mindset has spread so far and wide in such a short space of time, and not just in academic institutions. It's media, it's movies, it's some areas of government, corporations. So it like we are raising a future generation of lawmakers and politicians who may have this ultra anti-liberal progressive woke ideology, or whatever you want to call it. Talking of strength in numbers, though, shall we talk about women with penises and J.K. Rowling?
We must.
It's, I mean, that was the idea that women can have a penis is an idea that's new and has spread very quickly, and it's one of those ideas that if you deny, depending on where you are at the time, you might find yourself in a lot of trouble. So I'll read the headline, and we're going with all the great sources today. This is from the Scottish Sun, which is weird because you never see the sun in Scotland. Weather joke. You can have that. Okay, so the headline is, cops to record rapes as committed by woman if male attacker identifies as female. Now, this pertains to Scotland. Now, that's silly, isn't it?
Yeah. Silly is not quite the right word I would choose here. I think it's bollocks, pun intended.
Literally.
Literally bollocks. The funny thing is, I don't know if it's the same in Scotland, but, in England and Wales, rape is classed as if a man, and it says he, it doesn't say she, a person commits an offence if he intentionally penetrates the vagina, anus, or mouth of another person with his penis. Mm-hmm. Notice the pronouns there.
Yeah.
Okay? Doesn't say she anywhere there, okay? Women do not have penises. I can't believe I'm actually having...
That is a controversial statement in 2021.
Gee, oh, Lord almighty, I can't believe this. I mean, what a time we're living in. I mean, what the fuck is wrong with Scotland? I mean, this seems to be Sturgeon, Scotland. They're very keen on just letting anyone identify as male or female. Because, I think last time I checked, they also had the Gender Recognition Act, which will remove any medical checks for people who are seeking a gender recognition certificate, and shorten the time people have to live as their new gender before it's legally recognised.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, clearly, I'm not the only one who thought this was bonkers. You had Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling, who tweeted, "The penis individual who raped you is a woman." I think she was sort of paraphrasing George Orwell when she said, "War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. The penis individual who raped you is a woman." Yeah. I mean, it just feels like...
That's perfect, though, isn't it? But they all went for it as if that was a transphobic statement. And I like, as you just pointed out, the issue people tend to have here is not transgender people. It's this entire concept of self-ID, which requires nothing on your part whatsoever except to say, I'm a woman. Now, that's fine. If you want to be able to say you're a woman, you should be able to say you're a woman. But that doesn't mean the entirety of society has to bend to that subjective viewpoint. And this is where we get into trouble when we talk about women's spaces, prisons. I mean, some of the rape stats in prisons of those identifying as women are interesting reading, for sure. So, I mean, J.K. Rowling on this topic, I think she's right in her viewpoint, but I also think she's very mild. I think there are so much more stronger things she could say and be perfectly justified, and it'd be perfectly appropriate and civil, etc. But what I'm worried about is the fact that someone like her, as mild-mannered as her, can't say the mild things she says without all the rage, makes me think nobody can have this conversation. If you can't have the views J.K. Rowling does on this and express them in the mild, civil way she does, who can talk about this?
Yeah, that's a good point, isn't it? I mean, oh, God, I just feel like...
A woman.
I've said this before. I feel like a woman, however you pronounce woman.
I posted some. I was out in Manchester city centre the other night with some friends, and I posted some pictures because it was looking quite scenic. And I just put the caption Manchester, and someone corrected me and put Person-chester underneath, which I thought was quite funny.
Not Mixon-chester.
Yeah, they Chester.
Okay, in all seriousness, right? I just don't understand how this is gonna benefit society. I mean, this proposal is just gonna warp rape statistics, and it'll threaten women's safety by understating the threat of male violence. You know, it is overwhelmingly men who rape women. It's not controversial to say that or point that out.
I mean, so the thing is, you can say that about men, and as a man, I agree with that, and that's one of the reasons I want.
So you're not going to say, "Oh, not all men."
Not all men. I don't feel that's a generalisation. That's just a cast iron fact of biology that my sex is pretty rapey compared to women. And if you want to do probabilities and likelihoods, men do not come out great in this one. That doesn't mean we have to generalise all men as rapists, but it certainly means that we shouldn't put women in unnecessary risks and situations that increases the chances of them being raped or harmed by the other sex. And the thing is, people seem to think that just because somebody identifies as a woman, their typical behaviour should then map on to women, and I don't think that's just not true. The male pattern crime behaviour still exists with a biological male, whether or not they identify as a woman or not. It makes no sense to say that all of a sudden they'll be less likely to do A, B, and C because they identify as female. It just makes no fucking sense. It makes no sense, and also it's going to skew the statistics, because if they're going to record rapes by offenders with a penis as being committed by the woman, if the attacker identifies as a female, you're just gonna get overnight so many women who are going around apparently raping when they're not. They're men. Who does this benefit, really? I mean, this is a genuine question. Who is this benefiting? What does this add to our society? What I'm annoyed about is that people, including the media, in the way they report it, are operating as though this argument's over, that if you identify as a woman, you are a woman. You know, trans women are women is the mantra. Now, for me, that entire concept is still very much up for debate, and I don't think it's bigoted to say so. I think trans women are trans women, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Why do I have to pretend there's no distinction to be made between a trans woman and a biological woman to not be cancelled or to not be told I'm a bigot? And it's annoying when you see, like, I see headlines now where it's like, woman found guilty of rape, etc. You know, you go to the article and a few lines down, you see that they've transitioned at some point. But then, as just a standard practice, journalists are referring to them by their preferred pronouns. Even rapists are being referred to by their preferred pronouns and described as women. And I still think that very thing, that very thing is still very much up for debate. whether they're women or not. But suddenly society's decided that's a done deal and we all have to dance around it, which makes no sense to me.
You know what I don't understand? So this argument, so a lot of some of these campaigners, and let's face it, it's not the majority. It is once again a minority. So you get this minority who argue that trans women are women, right?
Yeah.
There's no debate, and yet what we see in certain sectors or organisations, they're removing the word woman. So they'll say people with uteruses or people who give birth or chest feeders.
Menstruators.
And ridiculous things like that. Or menstruators. I'm genuinely confused about this. So if you think a trans woman is a woman, then why get rid of the word woman? If you are a woman, then surely you have no problem with the word woman in that piece of literature. You don't need to say people with uteruses or people who give birth. Why are we removing the word woman then if you do genuinely believe you are a woman? And this is what I find confusing. The whole fucking thing is confusing, to be honest with you. I really can't keep up.
You know, it's crazy, though, how many people are playing along. So I remember there was a story a while back about a woman who was talking about her attacker, who identified as female, but in the quote, she referred to them as male still. And the reporter who wrote it up afterwards changed the pronouns of a direct quote to make it tie in with the gender orthodoxy. So that's just poor journalism, really, isn't it? You can't change someone else's quotes to make it more progressive. That makes no sense. I don't know if you saw a while back as well, the ACLU, the fucking ACLU, they're supposed to be a civil rights organisation. On the anniversary of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death, they tweeted out a quote of hers, and the quote was about something about the decision whether or not to bear a child is central to a woman's life for her well-being and dignity. They took out the word woman and put a person's life, and they changed the word she to their. They edited her direct quote on a day they were supposed to be sort of championing female empowerment. They edited a woman's quotes to make it tie in with their worldview and ideology. It's insane how people see. I would suggest that the overwhelming majority of trans women are not triggered by seeing the word woman or she, her anywhere. I don't think it helps them to erase that sort of language. I think they're quite fine and happy to just get on with their life. And like you say, it's a minority of activists that take the ball and go running with it, and we all have to play along.
Yeah. And there was this story in the Mail on Sunday where a female reporter went into the shop Zara, and two men were allowed to be in the woman's fittings room because they identified as women. And when she raised her objection, she said, do you do this everywhere? This is unacceptable. And she said, well, in some of our shops, like on Edgware Road, I think it's not Edgware Road, I think it's near Marble Arch, they get a lot of Arab Muslim customers. So they say, we don't allow it there. Because obviously the people wouldn't like it there, which tells you how absurd this whole thing is. If you think women aren't going to accept it from more conservative Gulf countries, then that tells you how uncomfortable the vast majority of women everywhere really will feel about this. If you're making an exception for one shop, it tells you how bonkers the whole thing is. And it is blatantly, it's just disrespecting women. Because, it's never men's spaces that are affected or eroded. It just seems to be women.
Yeah, I agree. And I can't overstate how much J.K. Rowling weighing into this has united women and helped. I think something big's happening here. I'm seeing more and more female solidarity on this issue, and these women aren't reactionaries. They've done their homework. They know the arguments. They know the law. They know the issue. We're getting a ton of books on this now from women, and I just feel like something's happening. I think their voice will become too loud in the end, and their movement too strong, that I think a lot of these places will start backing down on this policy, because nothing help. I mean, a lot of these places are doing it for corporate reasons. There's, business, etc. They think if they're ultra progressive and inclusive, they'll generate more revenue. I don't for a second think they care about anybody. But I tell you what, you'll do well not to do if you're a business: piss off women. That the female demographic in terms of money, it is a big one anywhere you look. Cinema, shopping, books, etc. And if they start voting with their wallet in these businesses like Zara, for instance, I don't think Zara could take the hit of no women turning up there, could they? If they starts happening, I soon think businesses will just say, you know what, I'm going to bow out of this gender hour and just sell you fucking shirts like I'm supposed to.
It just makes things like this makes me wonder what Christopher Hitchens would have thought about all of this, because it's been 10 years since he died, and there are so many people who whenever there's some sort of weird controversy, an event, they think what would he have said about all of this?
Yeah, Merry Hitchmas. So every 15th of December, on the anniversary of his death, people celebrate the great man online, have a little tipple, little glass of Johnny Walker Black. He's my hero. He's the person who's had the most direct influence on my life. We wouldn't be talking right now if it wasn't for Christopher Hitchens. I got interested in the whole God debate because of his writing, his debates, etc. I was absolutely fascinated with his wealth of knowledge, his oratory skills. He's unbelievable. I think Richard Dawkins said once, if you're ever invited to debate Christopher Hitchens, decline. So yeah, it is funny wondering because that's the obvious question, isn't it? What would he think about A, B, and C now? And I think you can get a good idea how he would have treated this new progressive woke ideology. He wrote a lot about identity politics in his book, Letters to a Young Contrarian. I tweeted some of the quotes out. Tweet them out every Hitchmas, actually. And he was very much warning people to beware of identity politics and be suspicious of people who announce themselves as part of a B, and C tribe when they're trying to make a point. He was very annoyed about people leading with how they felt rather than what they thought. He was ahead of his time, that man. I interviewed his son the other day, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I released the chat. Alexander Meliagru Hitchens. He's a bright young chap. So he's been on my radar for a while, but he wrote a great book on Anwar al-Awlaki called Incitement. Now, regardless of whether he was Hitchens' son or not, that book would have ended up on my nightstand at some point anyway. So it's a wonderful piece of journalism. Can't recommend it enough. But
I do know who he is. Do you know what? I hadn't made the link between him and Christopher Hitchens for some reason. But I'm very interested to know more about that, actually.
Yeah, it's a good book. Well, the interview's out on YouTube now if you want to check it out. I didn't ask him about Christopher Hitchens. It just didn't feel appropriate. Relevant's the good one. I mean,
I suppose if you're talking about Anwar al-Awlaki, it's a bit of a jump to say. So speaking of extremist men,
and I was genuinely interested in his work and what he had to say. He really knows his stuff. Obviously, I don't know why that surprises me, but I'm always very impressed by people who are that well read and can articulate it well. But he's it would have been strange, wouldn't it? Just to, I mean, I think what people need to understand is like that he's got a personal connection. Obviously, it's his father. I have a connection with this public figure, this understanding I have of him, and them two things aren't necessarily the same. And it feels a bit tabloidy or intrusive to start asking about it. So I didn't. I don't know if people think that's weird or a missed opportunity, but I did not ask him about it.
Well,
I'm sure he gets asked all the time as well. I'm pretty sure he's probably he'd rather. I don't know. I have no idea how he feels, so I wouldn't assume.
But who cares how he feels, as his dad would have said.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What else have we got to speak about?
Jussie Smollett.
Smollett.
Gee.
Juicy Smollett, as Dave Chappelle referred to him. Yeah, so, I mean, this was an interesting one. Alarm bells were ringing on this story. Jussie Smollett, American actor, black, gay as well. So he's really punching on the intersectional pyramid. The initial reports was that he went for a walk in the wee hours of the morning in Chicago to get a sandwich from Subway and was set upon by two white men wearing MAGA hats who
of course they were.
Racially...
Did they also shout, "Long live Trump"?
Yeah, something like, "This is MAGA country now." They threw the N-word at him, racial slurs, homophobic slurs, wrapped a noose round his neck and poured bleach on him. I mean, my God, that's like... I think the problem is, if you're going to fake a hate crime, you need to choose one thing. You can't, I don't know where, the homophobic and racist slurs would have been enough to sell it better. You didn't need to add a noose. Or the bleach. It's the more...
You got to add a noose.
It's one of them things...
You need an accessory. Why not a noose? They're all the rage.
Well...
they're coming back now after a century post-lynchings, so yeah.
People are losing their shit. There was a spate of men who hung themselves a while back, black men. One had hung himself from a tree. The suicide rate's quite high in males, as we know anyway. But because of the climate at the time, the Black Lives Matter organisation, the LA branch, was propagating this idea that they were all lynched. Even when we had security footage of one of them hanging themselves, they was still running with it. It's this climate we've created right now where we think lynchings are back, which is insane to me.
Basically, so I was reading that what made the police suspicious was his Subway sandwich.
Really?
Yeah. So apparently the sandwich was still intact. Nothing had happened to the sandwich. And you think, if you've been beaten up, I'm sure I have the right story here. I didn't just make that up.
No, that makes sense to me. It turns out, when this first broke, all the actors ran with it.
Of course they did. This is why when something happens, I very rarely comment on it now, and not just because of Jussie Smollett, but in the past things have turned out to be a hoax, and I don't want to look stupid by reacting very quickly, giving a knee-jerk reaction to something which then later turns out to have been completely false. So because of that, I'm very, very careful about condemning something or speaking about how horrific something is in case it turns out to be a freaking hoax.
It's funny because hate crime hoaxes are more common than people understand. Wilfred Riley, I've had him on my show. He's a very astute scholar on this. He's got a book on it, and you'd be surprised. And the funny thing is, the retraction or the updates don't get the column inches that the original stories do. So in the consciousness of the public, they think they're living in a hate crime ridden culture. It's indicative of Trump's America, etc., etc. And then when we find out actually this woman lied about having a hijab pulled off, or this guy didn't get his business burned down by white supremacists, he was just trying to scam his insurance company, those things don't get the column inches. So, yeah, it soon started to unravel this story, didn't it? It turned out that the court have found him guilty of staging this.
Yeah, so six counts.
Six charges, and the weird thing is he's still maintaining his innocence. I don't understand what's going on in his noggin, but he essentially the story is he hired two Nigerian American men, so two black men, to stage a hate crime hoax, and this was done to ostensibly to boost his profile. I think he thought this would lead to more opportunities for him. But I think what's really worrying about this is that how much time, and police time especially, this took up, how much money, how many people were investigating this when actual crimes were happening in the city of Chicago, how pissed off and exhausted the police chief of Chicago was when he made a statement about this, how angry he was that somebody had tried to besmirch the name of his city in this way. Everything about this stinks. And I don't know whether he should do jail time. I don't know what the punishment's going to be, but
because he's facing up to 20 years.
Right.
That's oh fucking hell. That is a long time.
It's disgusting. What sort of personality disorder leads a wealthy black man who's on a TV show in America to pretend that he's oppressed because of his race, to actually invent a scenario to make people think people like him in danger of just being lynched by Trump supporters walking down the street. There's something really sick mentally going on here. People are seeing oppression as an opportunity, and of course, this leads to people doubting actual attacks. I don't know if you remember, but at the time, this story broke and it started falling apart. Majid Nawaz got punched in a racist attack in Soho, I think. He was in London, and people were doubting him because of what had just happened with Jussie Smollett. So there's the knock-on effect from this kind of thing. Do you think he should go to prison?
Well, he fucking wasted police time. Yeah, he should. I mean, I don't know about 20 years, but he should definitely face fucking jail time for wasting everyone's time, money and effort. But what I find quite disturbing about this, really, is that I guess all of this seemed to fit into, you know, the left's perception of America that, you know, oh, it's still so racist.
It was so news porn for them,
homophobic. It was, and you know they were so willing to believe it because it just confirmed their prejudices that, you know, black people are constantly being lynched in America and gay people are just not safe, and that's why they swallowed it hook, line and sinker. I wonder, all these people who went on about how horrific it was initially, what they're saying about it now.
Fuck all, obviously. People never seem to retract or update. I mean, and then this happens on the right as well. I'm getting a little bit fed up. The same fuckers who were promoting stolen election conspiracies are now promoting COVID conspiracies, and they've not sort of gone back to their previous claims and updated anyone about. I mean, Majid Nawaz is a prime example. There's loads of Americans on the right who are just full-on anti-vax cranks now who are misleading people. And I don't understand, like, if I don't want to be wrong about something, so if I've tweeted something out that's incorrect, and it has happened, I've updated it. But it's a sad state of affairs, isn't it, that it's almost like people want this to be true by how quickly they jumped on it. And I can't imagine, why would you want that to be true? Why wouldn't you be sceptical? You have to treat these things seriously.
They do want it to be true because it tells them what they already believe. It confirms their worldview about the West or America.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Do you have any time for a few questions from Twitter?
Oh, yes.
Let's see what we've got. I'm just going to throw them at you.
Oh, there's one from Omar Dias. The new BBC habit of erasing details of ideology from articles about people convicted of Islamist offences. The erasure of Yazidi stories to stop contributing to Islamophobia. So I'm not really sure about this.
I don't know that's
actually.
To be true. This is news to me.
I don't know if that's true. Yeah, I've not looked that up. I will have to.
See, there's a perfect example because that if that's true, that chimes to my biases on Islam and the downplaying of it. But my initial response there was skepticism because I haven't seen or confirmed it myself.
Yeah.
So I don't understand the mindset of people who would just jump on these things because it confirms their biases.
But the thing is that Omar is usually a very reasonable commentator.
I agree.
I've noticed. So there must be some stories that he's read that has led him to do this. So if you are listening, Omar, I'm going to read some of these stories or try and find them. Or if you could tweet them to me, that would be great, so I can look into them. Because, you know, if the BBC is erasing details of ideology because they don't want to offend Muslims, then that's really bad.
Yeah, I agree. I will definitely look into that. Might be something to discuss on the next one. What else do we have? Oh, hang a second. We've got a militant vegan question for you. From Sarah. She asks, why do people love their pets, anthropomorphise them, but then still eat pigs, cows and so on? Is it because they are evil, or just can't be bothered with the admin to go veggie?
This is an easy one.
There's a bit of stink on that question, isn't there?
Well, the thing is, some animals really are bred just to be eaten. I mean, why else would you keep pigs?
Pigs can be cute. I'd love a pet pig. I think as well...
Pigs are not cute at all.
There's a separation, isn't there? There's sort of a cognitive dissonance going on because you don't see the process of the food getting to your plate. I mean, they even name it livestock And it's all behind closed doors. I've always loved animals. I'm a massive animal lover. But before I went vegetarian, I'd tuck into a steak. I'd tuck into a steak and not think twice about the fact that this was once a cow that was probably treated really bad. I just think society's designed that way for you not to think too hard about it. It's very easy for people to hold two books. I see it all the time, like people getting so angry about the way they've seen a dog be treated, and then so for instance, I remember I used to work with a girl once, and we were talking about MMA fighting, and I think that got us onto Joe Rogan. We was having lunch, and she was eating chicken from like Nando's or something, and we were talking about Joe Rogan, and she said, "Oh, I don't like Joe Rogan." And I went, "Why don't you like Joe Rogan?" And she goes, "Oh, he hunts animals." And she's there tucking into a battery farmed chicken that's probably had the worst tortured life ever, but she can't get on board with the idea of Joe Rogan killing an elk with a crossbow in a nice clean way where it's not suffered in the nature. Now, I'm not a big fan of either, but if you have to choose one, Joe Rogan's method is far more conducive to animal rights than the factory farming method she's currently chomping on. So it's just funny to see that cognitive dissonance, that she's supporting something far worse ethically from an animal's right perspective than Joe Rogan, but she can't get on board with Joe Rogan because the visual of it, the idea of him physically killing an animal is too much for her, but she's quite okay to outsource it somewhere else. It's strange how the human mind works. That and meat's tasty.
It is, and I'm sorry, but we anthropomorphize certain animals. Let's say dogs. There's a long history of dogs being our companions. It's different as opposed to, say, like pigs or cows, because they are bred for specific reasons.
But you could breed a dog. You could breed a dog for food.
I don't think you could. I mean, can you imagine tasting dog meat? Like, it would stink.
They do it in Korea, don't they? I mean, it's
yeah, but they're weird, and also, like, I mean, I remember watching this documentary when someone went. It's a BBC documentary where this woman went to, I think it was like Vietnam or somewhere, and they were cooking dogs, and she said, "Oh, you can just smell that, that wet dog smell." And I thought, ugh, that would put me right off. Also, Sarah just needs to go and eat a burger, I think.
See, there you go. That is a sort of hateful microaggression towards us herbivores. Like I would get annoyed, but like I always say, I don't have the energy. What do we got? Oh, this is a good one. Haider. He was my first ex-Muslim guest. Thoroughly nice chap. He said, "We haven't had an Aslan award in quite some time. Who's taking the year-end grand prize? Endless love to both of you. Your personalities are as infectious as your thoughts." Well, thank you. Can't say infectious anymore.
That's the Iram variant. That's the Iram variant. They're taking the myth variant. The symptoms are just feeling so enlightened after listening to us.
That's it.
Okay, Aslan. We haven't done an Aslan. Who do you think has been a proper wrong-un this year?
I almost have to say Majid Nawaz. I
knew you were going to say that.
Such a fucking crank now, and it's so disappointing to see. He can't take anything away from what he's done previously, obviously, but it's just he's turned into a proper shock jock, speak first, research later kind of commentator, and that's not something he always seemed to be. I just think there's something about radical personalities that they just swing that radical impetus, that radical instinct in different directions, and that's what they do. I mean, he's come from like Islamist to liberal Muslim. I think he just swings to extremes, and I don't know if that's something you can train yourself out of. How about you? Who would you like to give a good kick into verbally?
Oh God, I mean, there's just been so many this year. I can't remember all of these idiots, to be honest with you. I may have to think about that one, actually. Who have we really laid into this year, apart from everyone?
We've not even give Owen Jones a kick in, have we? I mean, we
haven't, and he's a proper. I mean, he lays into anyone who criticises the extreme trans ideology. I mean, he does come across as a bit of a misogynist. He like someone who has a woman problem.
This is funny that you should say this, because we've always known Owen Jones as a pleb, and people like us have always gone for him for his far left views. the Owen Jones bashing's becoming far more mainstream and common now because he's pissed off the women. And this matters to me. I honestly think it's going to be a great year next year for this new feminist movement, because this is what it feels like to me. It feels like feminist has got its legs back. Third wave feminism was a fucking joke to me, to the point where I could never even attach the label to myself anymore. If someone says to me, "Are you a feminist?" I'm like, "Well, it depends what you mean. What are we talking about here?"
I know.
But
I felt the same way sometimes.
This feels like a proper new feminist movement to me, and I like to see it. So yeah, it's just interesting to see what happens when you piss off the women. And Owen Jones is finding out.
Yeah.
Is that us?
I think so. What are you planning to do over Crimbo?
I am planning not to get COVID so that I don't have to isolate again. I didn't get COVID last time, but I got pinged by the NHS app on Christmas Eve and spent it at home. If all goes well, I'll be at my auntie's with my mum's side of the family. Granddad, cousins, sister, etc. What are you doing? Do you do anything for Christmas?
Yeah, my family will, it's usually my mum will just say, "Oh, shall I cook a roast dinner?"
Oh, do you have a proper roast and everything?
We have roast chicken, not turkey, because I think turkey's overrated.
I agree.
As you would agree.
Yeah.
And I do it with a Pakistani twist. I've actually written a piece about this, which will be up in due course.
What's the Pakistani twist? You take the chicken out in the garden and just slit its throat before you cook it?
Yeah, say Allahu Akbar and it's done. Just coat it in Pakistani spices.
Ooh, sounds good.
Have some samosas, have some rice, have some roast veggies.
I'm coming to yours for Christmas. I would much rather have that than the normal.
I don't think you would, because it's like a proper meat fest.
Oh, yeah, shit, there's that point, yeah.
You'd only be able to eat potatoes and trifle.
Yeah, I haven't thought this through, have I? Shit.
No, sometimes we do have like loads of veggie options as well. My mum always makes her pasta, cheese and broccoli, which everyone loves, and her cheese and onion pie as well. And I don't think the rice will always have meat in it either, so you would go well
Sounds
fed.
Great.
But I'm not going home for Christmas. I'm staying in London. I'm just going up for my birthday to Manchester.
Excellent. Well, have a fantastic Christmas and a great birthday if I don't speak to you before.
Thank you very much. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Non-religion specific celebration.
Are you planning on watching any cheesy Christmas movies?
Yes,
I think we need to give Michael Owen some recommendations. A Christmas Carol?
No, I always come back to...
You should watch that.
It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart, because I think that's amazing. It still stands up really well. I bought a 4K UHD transfer of it a couple of years ago and it looks spectacular. And you know what? A bit of a left field one. I think Batman Returns is a fantastic Christmas movie.
What? No, it isn't. It's so Die Hard.
It's Die Hard as well. Obviously, I didn't suggest that because that's just standard. That's to be assumed that we'll be watching John McClane save Christmas.
Yeah.
But yeah, It's a Wonderful Life and Batman Returns get me in the Christmas spirit for some reason. So, anything that jumps on your radar for Christmas movies?
I used to like A Christmas Carol.
The Muppets one.
I've not seen The Muppets.
It's great. This should be your Christmas homework. Watch The Muppets Christmas Carol.
Sure. Actually, I'm sure I did watch a bit years ago.
It's the definitive version of the story, as far as I'm concerned.
I like things like, Dr. Zhivago.
Not seen that.
Such a classic.
Neither's Michael Owen, so...
Yeah. I'll watch the Strictly Christmas special, of course, and watch whoever gets bumped off in EastEnders or Coronation Street, because that is the true spirit of the season.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, the dead. All right, have a good one.
You too.
Speak to you soon.